Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and we'll do another video here based on your suggestion. This one has to do with a very fascinating cryptid, one that I've never heard of before, but this is the whole reason why I love doing these videos. It's the idea that I can present such fascinating cryptids that are somewhere out there in this world to you here. So again, thank you so much for your continued suggestions. It is always an honor to do these videos from them. And what's unique about this cryptid is it's actually tied to a well-known, I guess you call it like a folklore type monster, in this case the werewolf, but I use that in quotation marks because it is the loosest association yet when it comes to the werewolf. And it's so fascinating the way this thing attacks, or purportedly attacks, and then the way it ultimately kills its prey. That's why I wanted to share it with everyone here, because normally under traditional circumstances I would not have discussed anything involving the werewolf because it's too common. But in this case, with this cryptid and the way it moves and the way it attacks, absolutely, I would be glad to share it for you here. So it has to do with a cryptid that's called the Stüpp. Now, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly. That's how it's spelled phonetically. Someone please point it out in the comments if it's said a different way. But at least in this case, I'm calling it the Stüpp, and it has to do with, again, a werewolf-like creature. They're found in Germany near an area called the Rhinelands. So if you've there, or if you've ever been to that area, if you're there now, you're in luck, because you do have, in this case, this cryptid somewhere wandering those locations. And I use air quotes on the word luck too, because here's how its brutal attacks happen. So how long has the Stüpp essentially been around? I did not find any information about that, but it seemed like, at least based on the preliminary info, as long as there have been tales of werewolves, there has been tales of this thing, whatever this Stüpp is. And again, it looks just like your average werewolf. So that's why you're seeing pictures of it here, because that's what it looks like. There seems to be no deviation of that fact. And the way it's found in the Rhineland area, which by the way is a location there in, I believe it's Western Germany. Is that right? The information I looked up. So if you're going to Germany, specifically go to the western side, and then there's a middle lower Rhine area. That's where the Rhineland areas are. And the way this thing works is as follows. It has to be midnight, because preferably that's when this Stüpp likes to attack. And if you're near some kind of crossroads of some sort, like let's say there's two roads crossing near each other, or you happen to be near a river or some kind of lake, or sometimes if you're even near a cemetery, there you are just nonchalantly walking. Let's say you're walking back towards your home, and then this thing comes out of the blue. The way it attacks is it pretty much just pounces right on your back. Now you're thinking to yourself, is that it? It essentially just jumps on your back. But what happens afterward truly makes it horrific, because essentially it digs its claws deeply into your back, so that way if you try to shake it off, if you try to run around, if you try to slam it on the ground or whatever in terms of taking it off, it will not fall off. That's how deeply it ingrains its claws within you. Now, the reason for this is because the Stüpp absolutely enjoys causing this havoc. It is not a nice cryptid. It is not a cryptid you want to run into, because it eventually, I guess potentially, feeds off of your fear. Obviously, if you have something like this on your back all of a sudden running around, it feeds off of it. It feeds off of that fear, and it actually starts growing. That's how it feeds. You can see the physical side effect of it, because whenever it starts enjoying that feast, it starts growing more and more. And then on top of that, physically, every single time you take a step forward, then this thing grows even more and gets heavier and heavier. So it's a gross, absolutely gross, in this case, victim of a cycle of, let's say, damage to yourself as a victim. the more you run, the more you panic, the more this thing grows and feeds off of that. And then in turn, this thing is growing, you're not able to knock it out, and so you start running even more, start panicking even more, and then it starts growing even more and more. So again, a very vicious cycle when it comes to that fact. And then it seems like the Stüpp essentially just feeds off of it so much that eventually you end up dying out of either madness or pure exhaustion. So the people that encounter this thing, the poor people, whenever that happens, they'll just essentially run until they can run no more, and then they just keel over and die, and then the Stüpp moves on to its next victim. No word though whether it actually has any kind of physical, let's say, attacks outside of the claws digging onto your back, like in other words, like the usual werewolf attacks, like where people are being fed or being, I guess, ripped apart. Nothing along those lines. So as far as this thing, I guess, being more of, let's say, a mental attack of some sort, that's its greatest asset. So there's even some kind of tale that tells of a man, as far as the origins of this stuff, and who came back as a werewolf, a giant werewolf of some sort. And what he did is he began tormenting those who wronged him back when he was a regular person. So that may be the origin of the stuff. All it is someone, I guess, got picked on for most of their life. They were treated very, very badly, and then when they died, somehow, some way, maybe through some kind of pact or some kind of deal, who knows, they came back as something that would in turn create some kind of vengeance. Except this thing, though, whatever it morphed into or whatever it turned into after all these years, it instead loves attacking anyone. No sign of it just picking on people that it picked on others. No, this thing just feeds on anyone and everyone. Again, at least mentally, not physically. And then as far as being able to stop this stuff, there's very limited things you can do outside of, again, controlling yourself and trying to make sure that you do not run like a madman, which of course turns it into even a worse situation. In this case, if you can't do that, but you happen to have an iron knife in your possession, or you see one nearby, you're supposed to take that knife and then either stab it on its paw, let's say the paw that's near your back, or if you happen to be lucky and its snout is nearby, then you're supposed to actually stab it in the snout, and then that makes the Stüpp fall off. So that seems to be one of the only physical ways. The other way isn't physical, but instead, if you know who the Stüpp is, like let's say you're looking at it, maybe you see it in a reflection somewhere, and you somehow recognize, even I guess with the face looking now like a werewolf, but you recognize the human-like face tied behind it. If you know that that's someone that you knew before, and let's say you happen to still know their name, if you call it out, then that, and you say the correct name, then the Stüpp is supposed to vanish completely. So very, very fascinating stuff. So this, the information, everything associated with the Stüpp. One more thing that I found out, other people were stating online that the Stüpp may actually be nothing more than, let's say, a metaphor for anything involving addiction. Like the idea that when something grabs a hold of someone, like an addiction, it just feeds and grows off of it. And the more that person does to get away from the addiction, they end up getting more hooked to it, which causes that addiction to grow even further. Maybe that's so. Maybe that's where these tales came about, and then it just morphed into this creature of sorts, being, I guess, a metaphor for it or some kind of allegory, who knows. But that's an interesting take. Otherwise, all the other tales have it be a physical being of some sort that does attack in that manner. So what do you guys think? The Stüpp, again, pretty fascinating cryptid of sorts. If anyone has any more information related to it, maybe someone that's there near the Rhineland area, that would be great to hear. If you've heard of, let's say, more local tales or tales of the past, you know how there's always those stories from family members that have heard it from generations back. If anyone has that too, great to hear. So, alright everybody, thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.